They said Maria de Zazoya was a witch, a murderer, a monster who had slain 840 souls. In 1610, the Spanish Inquisition carved her name into their records as one of the most prolific killers in Europe. But even the judges frowned when they read her confession. The math was impossible. The victims didn't exist. But the pain that brought those words from her mouth was terrifyingly real. Her story began like so many others of that cursed century, a whisper, an accusation, and a woman the church had already decided was guilty. Maria was a midwife, 52 years old, known for her sharp tongue and healing hands. When a child in her village died, the grieving family didn't seek answers. They sought someone to blame. And in those days, a woman who healed was often branded a witch. She was taken from her home at dawn, her hands bound, her neighbors watching as the soldiers dragged her through the streets. She did not scream. She thought reason would save her, but reason was the first thing the Inquisition burned. They told her, "If you are innocent, God will protect you from pain." She believed it until they brought her into the chamber. The air was damp, the smell of iron and oil hung thick, and there in the center of the room was a shape no human soul should ever behold. A pyramid of cold metal, gleaming under torchlight like the point of a dark star. The Judas Cradle. It wasn't a tool of execution. It was a study of anatomy, of mathematics, of how long a body could endure its own weight before the mind shattered. The victim was hoisted above it, naked, suspended by ropes. A single pulley decided everything. Too fast and death came early, too slow and the agony became infinite. It was a geometry of despair, perfected over decades. Maria was raised above it. The priest recited a prayer. The executioner released the rope. She descended by inches, gravity becoming her tormentor. The iron tip pressed into her, tearing, entering inch by inch. The body became its own instrument of torture. Her muscles seized, her breath broke into sobs. The inquisitors leaned close and asked, "Do you confess?" She said no, so they lowered her again. Hours passed. Her voice cracked, her skin tore. The body betrayed her faith. The mind did what it must to survive. It invented stories. One child, she said, then 10, then 100. Every inch of descent pulled another number from her mouth. When she reached the point of madness, she confessed to 840 murders, a number so absurd even her torturers hesitated. But once written, it became truth. The church had their witch. And yet that number, that impossible confession, would echo for centuries, and because it revealed something no one wanted to admit, that truth could be built from pain, that a confession could be engineered by geometry. The Judas Cradle was unlike any other device. It was not crude like the rack or the wheel. It was deliberate, elegant, precise. The metal was polished smooth, the angles measured to ensure the victim could not die too quickly. In some chambers, the iron point was coated in oil or filth to slow the process or invite infection. The victim could survive for days, suspended, impaled by their own weight, the wound deepening with every heartbeat. If they fainted, the torturers revived them with cold water or blows to the face. The mind broke long before the body. It was a system built not for punishment, but for obedience. Maria's confession was celebrated as divine proof. They burned her alive 3 days later, her ashes scattered to the river Tagus. The Inquisition recorded it as a victory, another soul purged of evil. But beneath the triumph, the judges began to whisper, 840 victims? How could a single woman commit such a thing? And then others began confessing too, to crimes that defied time, logic, reality itself. One claimed she had flown to the moon. Another said she'd poisoned entire rivers. The more they tortured, the more impossible the confessions became. And finally, a few men began to see it, that the instruments they worshipped for their precision were exposing not the truth of sin, but the flaw in their own system. The Judas Cradle had made them gods of pain, but not of truth. Years later, in 1782, a woman named Anna Goldi would be called the last witch of Europe. She too confessed under torture, and her trial would finally break the silence. The Enlightenment had come and reason returned to Europe's courts like a ghost demanding vengeance. The very devices that had defined medieval justice, the rack, the pear, the cradle, were cast into museums, stripped of their holiness, remembered only as instruments of shame. But some of them survived. Quietly in cellars and monasteries they were kept as relics of power, as warnings, as obsessions. The Judas Cradle stands today in a few dark museums, its iron rusted, its point dulled by time. People pass it without understanding what it truly represents, not just cruelty but precision. The belief that suffering could be measured, that the truth could be pulled from a human soul like a nail from wood. Maria de Zazoya's impossible confession became the equation that unraveled an empire of lies. 840 murders that never happened, but one perfect machine that made them all real. And that is how geometry once served the devil, in the name of God. They called it precision. The architects of pain, men in robes and scholars of faith, believed that by studying the body they could measure the soul. The Judas Cradle was not born in madness, it was born in reason. Engineers, not executioners, had forged its angles. The apex was calculated to pierce without killing, the ropes designed to shift the victim's weight so slowly that agony became eternity. Each drop of blood was a unit of truth, each confession, a number on a divine ledger. But reason, when twisted by fear, becomes something monstrous. When Maria de Zazoya's confession spread across Europe, it was not seen as horror, it was seen as proof. The Inquisition sent her testimony to universities and churches as evidence of Satan's reach, and for a time, her story became doctrine. Preachers spoke of her crimes in pulpits, painting the image of a woman possessed by the devil's cunning, who could kill from a whisper or a touch. But there was one man who didn't believe. Brother Thomas of Toledo, once an assistant to an inquisitor, had been in the chamber the day Maria confessed. He had seen her eyes. They were not the eyes of a murderer, but of someone whose mind had been broken open like glass. He had watched the way her words stumbled, how the numbers changed with every breath, how she begged the scribe to stop counting. When the Inquisition celebrated her death, Thomas began to write. Not scripture, but questions. How can pain birth truth? He asked. Can a scream be measured as proof of guilt? He began to collect testimonies, other impossible confessions, other miracles of justice. The woman who confessed to poisoning a river that did not exist. The farmer who admitted to consorting with demons but was deaf from birth, unable to hear their voices. The child who swore he had turned into a wolf because his torturer demanded he say so. He gathered them all and saw a pattern, a new geometry, this time not of metal but of fear. The Judas Cradle was not just a machine, it was a symbol, a mirror of an entire civilization's sickness, the belief that suffering could reveal divine truth. And so Thomas did the unthinkable. He wrote his own gospel, the Codex Doloris, the Book of Pain. In it, he described every torture device as a chapter of the Church's descent into darkness. The rack became the ladder of lies, the wheel became the halo of flesh, and the cradle, the cradle, he named the womb of God's silence, for he saw the truth the others feared, that the Church had not been hearing God's voice for centuries. It had been listening to the echoes of its own cruelty. The Codex spread in whispers. Banned by the Inquisition, it passed from monk to monk, from scholar to heretic. By candlelight, men read the words and began to doubt. If pain can make anyone confess, Thomas wrote, then truth itself is dead. That single sentence burned through the empire like wildfire. Judges hesitated before ordering torture. Executioners looked into the eyes of their victims and wondered what God they truly served. And for the first time in centuries, the Church began to fracture, not from war or rebellion, but from conscience. But the cradle did not disappear. It traveled, first to Italy, then to France, then to the cold cellars of Germany. Always rebuilt, always improved, each iteration a darker reflection of human logic, and with every confession it extracted, it reshaped justice itself. When the Enlightenment dawned, the philosophers who preached reason and equality unknowingly inherited the Inquisition's curse. They no longer used iron or rope, but words, rhetoric, isolation, and fear. They too learned how to extract truth without visible wounds. The Judas Cradle had evolved. It was no longer a machine of metal, but a structure of power. Maria de Zazoya's ghost lingered in this evolution. Her impossible confession became a metaphor whispered among early reformers. The woman of 840 sins, they called her, a myth used to remind rulers what happens when men mistake pain for proof. Centuries later, in the 18th century, Anna Goldie stood accused of witchcraft in Glarus, Switzerland. Her torture was gentler, her confession less grotesque, but the foundation was the same. She was interrogated until she said what they wanted to hear. And when she was executed, a physician who witnessed it wrote, "The body was pure, the crime was created." It was then, finally, that Europe began to dismantle its machines of confession, not out of mercy, but out of fear. Fear of what they revealed about the men who built them. The Judas Cradle vanished from use, buried in vaults or sold to collectors. But like every sin, it left an echo. Its blueprints found their way into the hands of anatomists, interrogators, even inventors of modern restraint. The study of endurance thresholds in the human body, used later in medicine, endurance trials, and even war, had its roots in that same geometry of pain. Thomas's Codex Doloris was never canonized, but fragments survive. One line written in the margins of his final page sums up the legacy of the cradle better than any historian could. The devil never needed to make men wicked, only logical. 400 years later, tourists walk through dimly lit museums, staring at replicas of the Judas Cradle. They take pictures, they shudder, they move on. But if you listen closely, beneath the hum of cameras and footsteps, there's still an echo in the iron. A quiet, rhythmic sound, a breath, a heartbeat, as if the metal itself remembers every confession ever forced from a human throat. Maria de Zazoya's story ended in fire, but her confession became the spark that exposed the greatest lie of all, that truth could ever be born from agony. And so the cradle still stands, not as an artifact but as a mirror, a reflection of what happens when belief becomes precision, when geometry replaces mercy, and when men, in their hunger to be divine, forget what it means to be human.